I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about results, a self-limiting proposition. Typically, results arise from either a goal-seeking structure or a reinforcing structure. And with each of them, there are difficulties inherent in the structure that are seldom considered. I mean, we end up being so actively pursuing results that we sort of miss things on the edges, which typically end up actually interfering with the results sooner or later. So this perspective is actually in two parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about goal-influenced results. And this is a simulation model as opposed to a qualitative relationship model, where the structure is there is some goal and some current state of things. The difference between the two of them represents a gap, and that gap is an impetus for activity intended to move the current state in the direction of the goal, and the movement of that current state is what's identified as the result. It's the what happens because of the activity. And if you run this as a simulation model, it's rather dull and boring. But the thing that it does point out is that the current state goes from where it was to the goal in one time step, which is typically very unrealistic. What more often than not happens is that there are some limiting force or limiting condition on the activity, such as resources, which might be people or material or something, so that while the difference between the goal and the current state is the impetus for activity, that the size of that gap is greater than the amount of resources available to support the activity, so that the activity is limited by the resources itself as opposed to simply being driven by the gap. So if you go ahead and set resources to some value, in this case 0.02, you'll notice that now the current state migrates towards the goal over some period of time, and here it's just days because that's what I picked. But at this point, it begins to change. Here it's linear because of the value of resources, but when it gets to this point, it changes, and the progress toward the goal is based upon the value of the gap, and the activity continues to decline. So now that it's happening in this fashion, the results are displayed, but something else is likely to be happening that's typically not realized, and that is that once you get to a point where the activity is controlled by the gap and not the resources, the difference between the activity and resources actually represents excess activity or excess capacity. And that excess capacity is typically going to waste. It's not employed to migrate the current state in the direction of the goal. It's just sort of wasted. And if you modify the simulation slightly, you can see on the output graph that the excess capacity comes into play as the activity is controlled by the goal, and as it finally gets to a point where the goal is reached, then all of the resources are excess. You've probably heard the comment about activity expands to fill the time available. Well, typically activity also declines to employ whatever resources are available, so that in addition to simply paying attention to attempting to achieve the results, it's appropriate to pay attention to the other components that are part of the relationship, because they're things that you are likely to want to utilize somewhere else. So this is a goal-influenced results perspective on results. This is a part of the Perspectives project, actually the element called results, a self-limiting proposition, which I said is in two pieces. I'll do the other part on growth influence results in a moment, and you're invited to join us in this project by sending your Kumu username to systemswiki@gmail.com. If you don't have a Kumu username, you can get one at kumu.io/signup. And if you haven't seen the introduction video for this project, the introduction video is at systemswiki.org. And I'll see you in another video shortly. Bye.